Hi everyone, thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Automation, Assessing the Impact on Qualitative Research. My name is Jennifer Audette and I'm the Director of Marketing at L&E. For anyone who's unfamiliar with L&E, we provide focus group facilities and recruiting services in 8 markets in the U.S. Our guest speaker today is Ray Poynter. Ray is the Managing Director of The Future Place and the founder of NewMR. He has spent the last 35 years at the forefront of market research and has written 2 books, The Handbook of Mobile Market Research and The Handbook of Online and Social Media Research. Ray is in popular demand as a conference speaker, workshop leader, writer, and consultant, so we are thrilled to have him here today to share his insight with us. Just a couple of housekeeping things. We will have time at the end, I hope, for some questions, so if you want to submit those throughout the webinar, you can do so through the question pod on the GoToWebinar control panel. And just to let everybody know as well that we are recording today's session, and we'll be sending out an email either later today or at some point over the weekend with the link to the recording, as well as the slide deck that Ray is going to share with us today. So I will turn it over to Ray. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you, Jennifer, and welcome to everybody out there on the line. And let's just move to the starting page here. So, automation, assessing the impact on qualitative research, because a lot of the time when we think about automation, we think about quantitative research. And today we're really going to focus on what is the impact already on qualitative research and what is the impact going to be in the near and not so near future. So, the agenda. First of all, the context and the impact of automation. And we're going to talk about quality because obviously automation is faster, obviously it's cheaper. But perhaps to most of the people on the line, quality is going to be one of the most important issues. Then we're going to look specifically at these qualitative issues, the rise of text and qualitative research, and then the future. So while the fuss about automation, it's going to be probably the hottest topic this year. This is a chart taken from the recent Green Book Grit report, which looks at the research industry trends. And one of the questions in there was about which things are hype and which things are much ado about nothing. And the number one big change item, the game changer, is big data. And that's not surprising. Automation was number 2, ahead of storytelling even, ahead of AI, ahead of virtual reality and augmented reality, and ahead of things like the automatic buying of services and projects. So there's a broad consensus that this either already is a game changer or it's becoming one. Late last year, Lenny Murphy and I published this report, and if you're interested in the wider context of automation, how to be a success in this world of automation, then you can download the report. But here is a summary in just a very few key points. The first is that automation makes things faster, cheaper, and sometimes better. There is almost no automation that happens that doesn't make things faster and cheaper. Sometimes it makes it better, sometimes it doesn't. This is really important for researchers. End clients determine the quality that is bought. Too often I hear researchers saying, you must use this, you must use face-to-face, you must use ethnography, you must use semiotics because that will give you the right answer. Well, we could advise that this is going to give you a better answer, but at the end of the day, the client is trading off speed, invested time, risk, and money. They have to decide what is going to be the right mix. It's not for the vendor to say, oh, no, you mustn't buy that. What you need to buy is this one, particularly if this one is more expensive or takes longer. What we are seeing, and I've done a lot of client-side interviews, is that it's speed that is making the biggest difference. Clients are increasingly wanting to use research at the speed of their business. The speed of the rest of the business has got faster and faster, and the insights teams and the brand managers and people like this want to be able to use research, but they want to be able to give an answer now, not an answer 3 or 4 days after the decision has been made. And what we are going to see, and both Lenny and I are very clear on this point, is that we are going to see more research being conducted as a consequence of automation. Not necessarily more revenue being spent, but actually I think that will happen too, but clearly more research. So there will be more evidence-based decision making inside clients as a result of these changes. So to highlight what I mean by automation and the sorts of impacts it has, I'm going to take an analogy from glass blowing. Now, it used to be a real skill. You had to be apprenticed, you learnt how to blow the glass, you had to get out this hot liquid, spin it, blow into the long tube, and it was a real skill. But in 1905 in New York, Michael Owens automated it for the first time. There was a massive increase in production. There was a massive, massive reduction in costs. It went down from something like $2.50 a bottle to under 5 cents. And so that led to all sorts of changes. The first is that making glass bottles became de-skilled. People who had a real skill, they'd spent 20 years becoming the best in their trade, could now only produce a handful of bottles, and across the way there was a machine with semi-skilled operators producing hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of glasses, vases, bottles and so on. So that was obviously bad for the morale, and it was really bad for the income of people who were skilled glassmakers. What else it did was that glass became used for many new things. Before that, we didn't put food into glass bottles. We almost never put drinks into glass bottles. Fizzy pop became a possibility. Sodas, medication, we could put medicine into a much wider range of glass bottles. Food became safer. Drinks became safer. Medication became safer because now we had these highly consistent, they might not have been as pretty, but they were much more likely to hold the liquid safely, not tip over, not spill if they were tipped over. Consequently, there was a phenomenal increase in employment, several 100% for year after year of more people being employed in the glassmaking industry because the glassmaking industry grew. And the health of the people in New York and later around the world improved because of this automation. So there tends to be winners and there tend to be losers. But good automation changes the world. It doesn't just automate that task. It takes something like glass automation and says, now we can put medicine into those bottles. Now we can put food into those bottles. We can change the way we do things. We can store things for longer. We can ship things further. So we bring around all of those sorts of changes with the right sort of automation. Now, if we look historically at automation, the first thing that got automated was labour. I live in the Midlands in the United Kingdom, and in my part of the world, people used to make their living by making clothes, by making lace stockings, by making jumpers and shirts and things like this, and they span the fabrics and they knitted those fabrics at home, and it was slow and it was skilled. And the first mechanization was in the fabrics industry. And it led to a lot of people losing their income, but it also led to many, many more people being employed, many more people being able to afford clothing. Clothing changed its role, moved forward, and it was the steam engine and the steam hammer and the steam train, and then of course electricity. And all of these things replaced labor. People didn't have to work as hard. Things could be done faster and more productively. The next level of automation was about skill. So it used to be that all the pots were thrown by hand. Now, pretty much everything in my house, I've got one or two things that are made by hand, but nearly everything has been made by machine, and it looks great, most of it. Counting money. people used to be paid to count money, and people had different levels of skills. Some of them could do it faster, some of them could do it more accurately. Now money is counted by machines. You pour the coins in, they're separated and counted. You pour in the notes, they're separated and counted. The ATM dispenses your money to you. So all of those skills, automated. The next set of skills that we're seeing at the moment are skills of the mind, really. So sat-nav. Originally, mapping companies just had maps. They got together with the sat-nav, and now you say, okay, I want to go from where I am now, and I want to go to this city, and I want to avoid toll roads, and it will find a good route for you, taking into account things like transport and so on. It's competing with your mind for that. Google Translate, competing with other methods of finding the information. So all of a sudden we see the mind is coming under competition. The next level of automation, the one that is really only just beginning to emerge at the moment, is creativity. So interpreting data. Already Associated Press, Yahoo, and people like this produce reports where they'll take in data and they will write the report. Now the reports are highly structured and the data is pretty structured. So they are things like the annual report from a company. We're just about to come to, we've gone through labour, skill and mind have all being automated. Labour has been long since automated, skill pretty much automated, mind we're in the early stages, and we're just beginning to look at creativity. There are robots writing poetry that most of us can't tell from human written poetry. There are people like the Associated Press and Yahoo who are writing automated reports. The data comes in, the report is created, a human checks it briefly, and out it goes. So we are going to see more and more creativity, but not soon, and I will come back to that in a moment. So I highlighted earlier this issue about better or worse. And if we think about automation, let's think about some of these differences, and you won't all agree with me, but let's think about supermarket food. If I buy a can of soup from a supermarket, do I want it made by a human who mixed it in their kitchen at home, who then got a soldering iron to close the tin and put it on the shelf? No, I want something that's pretty much been untouched by human hand all the way through the process. If I go to a restaurant, do I want food that's been cooked by a machine? No, I want something that's been cooked by a chef. I don't want it going into the microwave. I don't want it being put in an oven for 22.5 minutes. I want somebody, a human, to be in charge of taking it out at just the right time for this piece of meat on this particular day for this particular customer. If I'm buying canvas for a painting or oil from a painting, I probably want those to be produced to a very high standard with an automated process. But if I buy a painting, I don't want a painting that a machine has made, I want a painting that a human has made. I actually want some of those slight errors within the processes. If I'm looking to match data, I give somebody a list, okay, here's 100,000 names, I want you to remove everybody who's got a duplicated email address. You bet I want to automate that process. I do not want to trust somebody to go all the way through, and I don't want to give them such a boring job as to go all the way through. But interpreting data, that is mostly for me a human thing at the moment. If I'm asking someone to create some new contact lenses for me, would I like a human to sit there, grind it, hold it up to the light, grind it, hold it up to the light, or do I want a machine to produce them? I want a machine to produce them. When I get my eyes tested though, I like to be talking to an expert, somebody who takes into account me and who is looking for other things than just the machine. My regular suit, I'm looking for a machine to have made it. But most women, when I talk to them, their wedding dress, it might only be an alteration, but they like some human alteration. If I think about chocolate candy bars, unless I'm right at the top of the market, I want something that's regular and hygienic and machine made. But actually, cakes, almost always better if they're made by humans. So we see that automation is sometimes worse and it is sometimes distinctly better. There is no single rule. It can be the same, it can be better, or it can be worse. And then we get some which really split people. So the supermarket checkout. You go to the supermarket checkout and you can check your sales out. And I must admit, at first I hated them. I've got used to them now. But I've started as a people watcher looking at what's going on. And in some stores there are queues for people to use the self-checkout. And there is an assistant standing free. And then other stores I go into with a different demographic or a different time of day and a different mindset, I see people queuing for the assistant when there are 2 or 3 self-checkouts empty. So clearly it has got a different degree of attraction to people. Lots and lots of people like organising their own flights, but not everybody, particularly senior execs who will by and large still be using a travel agent or a service. So there are differences in what they think better is, partly because they're looking for different things. When you and I are looking to book our own holiday, cheaper is a pretty big issue. It might be much less of an issue for the CEO of our company. One of the interesting and challenging things about automation, and it's something that sends a shudder down qualitative researchers' backs, is standardization. But that's because we often think about standardization wrongly. So this is Joseph Whitworth, and before he came out with the standard, back in the steam engine days, every single blacksmith had their own taps and dies. They had their own sizes of nuts and bolts. So if you bought something from one blacksmith and you took it to another part of the country and it broke down, you had to go back because nobody else had got the nuts and bolts to fix it. So he brought out what was called the Whitworth standard, went on to be the British standard, and is used in the United States too. And that's made it possible for different companies to build things and compile them together. So what we hate in research is cookie cutter standardization, where, okay, you're going to have 2 focus groups and they're going to be run like this, and this is the discussion guide and this is the process. And we don't like that standardization when it's done with people, never mind when it's done with automation. But for those of you who can remember your childhood or have got children, what we want is Lego. You can build anything you want with Lego. But imagine the Lego pieces didn't fit together. They would be useless. You wouldn't be able to build things. Imagine your child has got a great Lego collection, so a cousin comes along or an aunt and they've got a great present for them. They know they like construction toys and they gave them a piece of Kinex, or they give them a piece of Duplo, or they give them a piece of Meccano. And the child is probably polite enough to be grateful, but they know it doesn't work. We want that interconnectivity, the ability to work with things together to create something bigger. So if we look at existing Qual, what has happened so far with automation? Well, the biggest impact in conventional qualitative, face-to-face focus groups, face-to-face in-depth interviews, in-home ethnographies, these sorts of studies have been really about the logistics. So we have better calendar, we have better booking of participants, we have better recording facilities. I was at a facility recently and the client said, can we have the tapes afterwards? And I thought, how charming. How many years has it been since we used tapes in a facility, a viewing facility? We're digitized, we have stuff that will start and stop on voice, we have cameras that will zoom in on people increasingly, the whole payment process, if we're having to go around to different locations, we're using the sat-nav to tell us where we've been, to help us get to places. If we're management, then we can control who's doing what with the sat-nav, the production of materials. Increasingly, we're going to see people start to use 3D printing as part of that. So people may sketch an idea in a focus group and then we can actually get the machine to produce that and they can look and say, oh, actually, no, that's not what I want. So the logistics of Qual, lots and lots of automation. Lots of aspects of online Qual have been automated. So discussions, focus groups, MROCs, All of these sort of things, so the notifications, preloading questions. So I want this question to be asked at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, but I'm in a meeting at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. No problem. For some years we've been able to preload that. We can preload quite often probes to things. We're getting automated transcripts back from more and more things. There are analyses, I mean, word clouds I hate, but there are some better analyses that are beginning to come back for automating the early part of the analysis of online qualitative. And of course, digital qualitative, really exciting. So social media ethnography, gathering and monitoring posts, organizing, tagging, visualizing, structuring, participant collaboration, autoethnography, mass anthropology, where we're asking people, the participants in the research, to use their smartphone, capture images, upload them, download new tasks, maybe just use SMS when they see things. That's some bad news for me to deal with later by the look of it. It can't be repaired. Again, apologies for that. This has not happened before. Push notifications, time stamping, frequently asked questions, so we can give support to people who we've asked them to keep us a diary. They get a query, they can actually go online and get an answer back 24/7. So all sorts of aspects of digital qual are really dependent on automation, and we're going to see more and more automation in those. We're going to see more and more automation in the online qual. Generally, these things are faster, easier, cheaper, better. It is better to have a sat-nav to help you get to the right location. It is better to have something that turns itself on and off automatically. It is better to have a recording device that adjusts the recording levels to make sure that they're clean. None of these things take anything away from what we're doing. Preloaded questions, we don't have to use them, so it's not making it worse, but it's certainly making it better for us in that we can sleep and still be posting questions. One of the things that we are seeing are more artifacts. And there's a great presentation on this from last year from Sue Bell, an Australian market researcher. If you put in a few of those words into Google, it will take you through to her paper. But we're seeing more text. By more text, we're doing that because of the online qualitative, online discussions, the MROCs, all of these generate text. We're seeing more audio. We're seeing audio from the viewing facilities, but we're also capturing it in locations. We're asking participants to capture audio and images and video. So all of this is artifacts. Because we have more artifacts, we can do something with them. And I just want to highlight some of the change as well that the technology is making, and the difference between recording audio and doing voice recognition. So we have been, ever since the cassette recorders, and to some extent before that with the big reel-to-reels, qualitative researchers have been recording interviews. Long interest in that process. But recognition is different. Think Siri, think Alexa. You say something to the machine, it doesn't make a recording of what you said. It understands what you said and answers you. So with mobile and wireless, increasingly easy to capture as recordings. But equally, people are becoming very accustomed to speaking to devices now. There are more and more devices where you'll phone something or where you'll ask for it, where people are speaking to it. If we have a recording, we do all the analysis afterwards, what we get are the recordings, and we have to play them or we have to have them converted to text. But with recognition, that analysis happens in the device at the time. So if somebody is doing a digital ethnography for us, their self-ethnography, they're capturing their life, they can be saying things into the machine and it will go, oh, that is interesting. Tell me a bit more about that. Could you show me a picture of it? Could be the sort of automated, voice-activated responses we can build into that process. Recordings are incredibly time-consuming to analyze. Typically we say 1 hour of video takes 3 hours of analysis. If we're using recognition, it's much less time-consuming. So this is going to make a real change to our ability to work with audio, our ability to work with video. When we get that text analytics, there are really 3 things that we can use automation for. The first is not really our problem. We can use automated coding to pass that off to quantitative analysis. The second category, and this is one of the really strong areas at the moment, are using tools like Leximancer or NVivo, collectively computer-aided qualitative data analysis tools, to tell us more about the structure, to help us file the qualitative information, file our memos, file the photographs, the images, make them accessible, tag them and share them. And then to be able to search back and say, okay, this is an interesting comment. Did anybody else say this in any of the other interviews? Has anybody else tagged something as being duplicitous, contradictory? Let's find out where it is. The next level, of course, the one that we're not really there, although some vendors will say we are, is interpreting that text, really finding the story in it. But that will come by and by. So, automation and analysis. It is predicated on having artifacts to analyze. Transcripts, photos, videos, there has to be something. The days of a qualitative researcher who would go and run 4 interviews, take almost no notes, run 3 focus groups, taking almost no notes, would then think about it, they would read their jotter and their journal, and they would do the analysis. That can't be automated because there isn't something there for the machine to work with. However, as we mentioned a moment ago, we are getting more and more artifacts, and as we get more and more artifacts, and if we store them in compatible formats, then there is a role for automation to play. First of all, the organizing, storing, filtering, and really I would say that is a must. We must all be getting better at using tools that will do the organizing, storing, and the filtering of our artifacts. The next level down are the things that will start to give us an overview, that will say, aha, most people in this data set are very negative about the prospects for this, but here is a group who are quite positive and they're different in these ways. And then we'd say, well, let's look at that, and we'd say, oh, well, yes, these are employees and those are customers, and that's the difference. So it's not so exciting. The machine will suggest ideas and we will look at them. The next level in is interpretation, and there's a little bit going on, but it's got a long way to go. And eventually, the holy grail that people are trying to find is, can we produce machines that will go all the way through to storytelling? And I anticipate working for another 30 years. I don't expect to be replaced in storytelling in that time. So the near future. We're going to see a lot more virtual reality and augmented reality. We're going to see that face-to-face. We're going to bring people into viewing facilities, and they will be using VR and AR, but we will also do it remotely. People will be using VR at home, and of course AR, just think Pokemon Go, is something that can be used all over the place. So you're collecting your digital diary, and all of a sudden you see some extra information on this process. So this, people are doing this now, people were doing this last year. This is going to just get bigger and bigger. Chatbots, at the moment these are really basic, but they're cheap and they're fast. So if we have an online discussion with more than a handful of people, it's really difficult to monitor it and moderate it. Chatbots can help that process, and we will see more and more chatbots used as part of MROCs, online discussions, and those sorts of things. We will see continuous improvements in text analytics. Don't expect an overnight breakthrough. Expect it to get a little bit better all the time. And the best system this year will not necessarily be the best system by the end of the year. Don't think you're going to be able to just pick on one, say, I'm going to go with Odin text or something like this and stick with it. You're going to find you will need to move around. Speech-to-text automation, especially for video, this is beginning to work. It's going to get better and better and better. Now, the great thing about that, of course, is if you do the speech-to-text conversion, you do a little bit of video recognition, then you can get hundreds of hours of video and say, show me the clips where people are talking about coffee. And then you'll analyze them in your conventional human way, but at least you're finding those pieces. So image and video search and tagging, yeah, it's getting better and better. What we're going to see because of all this is much more observational research. So this is partly to do with technology. It is possible. It's also partly to do with this growth in understanding of the difference between System 1 and System 2. Growth in the understanding that people are poor witnesses to their own motivations and actions. So we know that we need more observational. Some of that will be passive, some of that will be biometric data collected automatically. Some of this is happening at the moment. More and more of it will happen this year and next year and onwards. And we're going to see more quantification of research that used to be Qual. And we shouldn't battle that. We should be moving to the stuff that can't be quantified. The stuff that is the so what. Now, why are these people different to those people? Let's not worry too much about the stuff that can be quantified, because it should be. Anything that can be automated should be, anything that quantified should be, and what is left is the majority. The not so near future. Okay, we're going to move now into a bit of a time bubble. This could be 5, this could be 10, this could be 15 years out. What are we going to see? Well, when people come into the viewing facility, facial coding automated with machines will tell us whether they're telling the truth or not. Lie to me, brought home. They're going to be wired up, so their galvanic skin responses and their heart rates and these things like that are going to tell us whether they're excited, lying, really involved in that. We're going to use voice stress analysis to tell us about what they're really thinking and what their emotions are. Beyond that, if we're in a viewing facility, maybe we'll hook them up to an fMRI scanner too, and we'll really get to understand their underlying emotions and reactions, and we can automate that process. And probably the questions they're going to be asked will come from an algorithm that identifies who's telling the truth and what are they telling the truth about. We're going to see real robot chatbot interviewers, where people will sit and they will chat to the robot, be interrogated and so on. And we will see AI start to turn Qual into quant, because the reason you can't turn Qual into quant is that the qualitative researcher is an ingredient in the process. There is no algorithm. But if you had an artificial intelligence that could do qualitative research, it could do it in parallel with thousands of people, and it could draw something across that. So we could then see Qual and quant beginning to merge. But would it work? I have doubts that some of these will ever work. By ever, I mean 100 years. Will people agree to it? Will I go into a viewing facility for something that can tell whether I'm lying or not, even if I don't know that I'm lying, and can work out the best way of taking money off me, and all sorts of things? I'm not sure that people are going to agree to this. I'm not sure that governments are going to agree to allow these sorts of devices to be used by anybody but governments. And will it be portable, cheap enough, fast enough? fMRI scanners are very clever, but we almost never use them because they're phenomenally expensive. There has to be breakthroughs of technologies we haven't yet imagined before some of these things can actually be done in a way that will be portable enough, cheap enough, fast enough. So I don't think we need to worry about the not so near future. I also want to highlight the metaphor of the camera. So automation and technology means that anybody can take a photograph. It focuses automatically. I hold my smartphone up and it will adjust the focus, and it's great. It can adjust for light automatically. I can set it so it does the red eye adjustment. I can get it so it will do multiple pictures automatically for me, and even suggest the best one. But you know what? A skilled photographer beats me hands down every single time. We may see that more and more people can do qualitative research because of automation, but good qualitative researchers will still produce the best results, provided they carry on developing and using the tools. You wouldn't find a really good photographer rejecting a light meter, rejecting autofocus. They'd have the ability to turn autofocus on and off, mind you. They'd have the ability to use more lenses, but there's a lot of automation in the tools they're using, and in fact pretty much all professional photographers use digital cameras, not film cameras now. So they will use the technology. We as qualitative researchers need to use the appropriate technologies, but the difference between us and a DIY qualitative researcher will be like the difference between a skilled photographer and me with my smartphone. So, in summary, online and digital qual are largely the result of automation. We would not have online and digital qual to anything like the extent we have it if it wasn't for automation, and it will continue to see more and more automation. Face-to-face qual, automation is mostly about the logistics, and I don't expect that to change dramatically in the next 5 years. Automation of analytics is predicated on having artifacts, and there is a growth in artifacts, so we will see the need for more automation in terms of being able to file, structure, organize materials, do analysis across projects to really warehouse those things properly, and we're going to see a growth in the quality of those techniques. And be careful, if you see a demonstration of something and it doesn't work, don't dismiss it as something you don't need to ever look at again, because it might work next year. A lot of this stuff is launched in beta, as some people will say. It doesn't actually work when they launch it. So keep an eye on it to see whether or not in the next version, for those of you who ever saw Windows 1 or Windows 2, it was pretty awful. And it was pretty much Windows 95 before we had something up and running that was really quite interesting. So don't write things off if they're not quite what you think they should be. Keep an eye on them. If you can automate it is the way that things are going. So we should focus on things that can't be automated. What is it that we do that is special? What is it that sees deeper, that connects the non-linear functions that people do in a way that makes the story? That is the way that we will enhance our ability to go forward, and we should use automated tools to help us do that better. So thank you very much, and I look forward to questions.
Great, thank you so much, Ray. As you said, we can start taking questions now. I've got one here for you. Are solutions like Odin Text being used to aggregate, analyze, or summarize focus group and or IDI transcripts? If so, what's working?
I've seen people use NVivo very successfully. I've seen people use Leximans. I've not seen people using Odin Text, but I suspect somebody is. So if you're trying to look at, say, let's say you've got an MROC and you've run 15 discussions over the last 2 years. You're trying to look for what sort of language is being used, what things promote longer discussions, which things tend to cut off discussions, what topics are brought up when they're not supposed to be the topic. It's great for looking at those sort of things. It will give you in lots of cases, here are the words that are used in combinations. Leximantra I like more because it will tell you more about the constructs. So it will start to say, looks like people have got this real concern about affordability. It keeps coming up in conversations. So they won't, it's not picking words, it's talking about affordability. So will it cost too much? I can't afford it. I don't have the money. It's too expensive. And it will group all of these together and say affordability is coming through. Now it's a very manual process because quite often it will come up with things and you look at them and go, oh no, that's a machine and that's not a real pattern. So you have to tell it to ignore that, or you divert it into a slightly different question because in this area that word doesn't mean that, it means something different. So for example, if we are talking in to IFAs, financial advisors, most automated tools will treat risk as a negative, and you have to retrain them to say, no, actually here, risk is a business opportunity. And so context is important, and you'll need to work with them. But there's interesting work going on in those. And again, I know the people at Vision Critical have been looking at how can you try to draw stories across. So every transcript of every discussion is in one enormous database, and you can start to ask it to draw lines through that to see what's happening.
Great. Do you think that there will be AI that can evaluate body language and other unspoken acts that give insights?
Absolutely. Whether it'll be inside the next 100 years, I'm doubtful. Provided we don't kill the planet, we will end up with something that, and it won't necessarily be AI. It's a bit of a technical distinction, but there will be machines that can interpret it. And why I say it may not be AI is that when I was at university studying computer science in the 1970s, we were trying to get machines to convert languages, and we tried to convert languages by parsing the languages and actually understanding them. So you'd try to understand French, and then you would write it in English, which you also understood, which is how humans translate. Google Translate doesn't. It says, when people write this in French, it is normally written this way in English. So you could imagine machines saying, when people do this with their body language, and with the cameras and the sensors and the movements, they will know the heartbeat moving, how fast you've moved your eyes, have you done micro expressions. It tends to mean this. Now, it might not some of the time, but they will be certainly as good as humans at doing that at some point in the future, but not in your working life.
Okay. Can you talk a bit about tagging video?
Yeah, so at the beginning, tagging video was simply you'd look at one of the systems and you would have the ability with things like Focus Vision of adding in comments, and so companies like Procter & Gamble would all be able to share a video library, and they would add tags, and then of course you can search to the tag and so on, and that's fantastic, and that's what I mean by using automation for structuring. What we're beginning to see now, and I saw a presentation from Kantar yesterday in London where they had used the system and they were looking at videos and they were finding all the situations where people were drinking, and they used another bit of software to estimate whether they're drinking alcohol, and they then and which brands. So that information was able to say this beer brand on these frames, so these number of frames have got that information. To go further, they then had to skim to those frames and look at it to say, partying, drinking on own, drinking as a couple, drinking with food, drinking without food. Pretty much that is still manual, but at that early stage, there's another company, Living Lens in the UK, run a service which is entirely around being able to tag, index things. They've started doing more and more automated voice-to-text translation, so then you can search by the text to try to find things that are in there. Search by logo. Now, as the presentation from Gail Bertrand at Kantar was saying yesterday, some logos are easy. Searching for a Starbucks logo, visually very straightforward. Searching for a Nike swoosh is much harder. Knowing whether somebody that Nike swoosh is actually adding something to that frame and is making people feel happy about it isn't even being attempted yet by anybody seriously. So it's at stages.
Okay. Will AI be able to own up to making a mistake if or when data has been misinterpreted?
Yeah, I mean, that is part of the training process. So even at the most basic, if we take some of the, like a sifter, text sifter is a good example of that. You can train it to do some analysis of text, and it will run the analysis and it will give an estimation of, I think this is this good, but it will also throw you some cases and say, I can't even guess on those. If you could teach me, then I can get it right. And then as well, so that is when it owns up to not knowing. But of course, an essential part of training is to tell them that they are wrong. Now, I'm trying to learn Japanese, and I use Google to back me up, but I'm very, very good at never telling Google to learn from what I have done. because my Japanese is shocking, and the last thing I want is Google to learn from my shocking Japanese. So who we're learning from matters. If you think about civics and if you think about truth-telling, there are some people you think, yeah, we'd love the machines to learn from them, but maybe there are others where we wouldn't like the machines to learn from them.
Great. Someone asked, what types of ways can we incorporate automation during the recruiting process?
A lot of this is already in there. So storing everything you ever know about somebody is a really good start. So the longitudinal ongoing communities will often recruit people for qualitative exercises based on psychometrics, psychographics, all the sort of things that used to be a complete nightmare when you would go to somebody, instead of saying, okay, I want 3 men aged 25 to 35 who drink beer, you'd say, I want 3 inwardly motivated but occasionally altruistic people who do this. That becomes more possible if you collect more data about people. We're seeing people being recruited out of social media. Again, there's a degree of automation in that process. And if you're running a facility, if you're running a list, balancing that list, spotting out for people that are coming back too often, spotting for people who are unreliable. So for most qualitative researchers, whilst we would absolutely love the facility to recruit exactly the right people, we'd almost go for nearly the right people, but definitely going to turn up. And again, that is something we can get with the automation. We can automate the record keeping, we can automate the pinging, just as in the way my doctor pings me an automated message to say, hey Ray, you know you've got an appointment tomorrow, and then they'll ping me one tomorrow to say, you know it's today, you probably should be setting off now.
Right.
That sort of process is all going to be built into the recruitment, as will scoring participants, and participants scoring researchers too, probably.
Great. That's actually it for the questions. If anybody has anything else, we can give you a minute here. All right. Well, like I said, we will be recording. We did record the webinar, so we'll send that out a little bit later, and along with the slides. Thank you all for joining us, and thank you for speaking, Ray. It was really very informative, and I appreciate you sticking it out through the technical difficulties. Thanks, everyone. Have a great afternoon.
And on behalf of my Mac, I would like to apologize. And for those people who say Macs never go wrong, well, you saw it twice today.
Thanks, Ray.
Bye, all.